What is up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another Mushoku Mondays. I have to apologize. First off, I got a confession to make. I have just finished chapter 10 of volume 6. And as much as I wanted to get completely done with volume 6 this year, I don't think it's going to happen. The reason being is when I read 9, Turning Point, and 10, I realized I think those two chapters are going to have to be a video in themselves. As much as I wanted to get through chapter 7 all the way to hopefully 9, I don't think it's going to happen. There's just way too much stuff I need to talk about after reading those two chapters. It far exceeded my expectations for what the novel itself was going to provide that the anime just did not deliver on. So I just want to get that out of the way. I don't think we'll finish by the end of the year just based on the fact that, again, those two chapters I might just do full-on videos for themselves. Now, I can hear the people screaming, just make 2-hour videos. I can't. I literally, as much as I want to, the equipment that I have right now, unfortunately, it doesn't work. This machine that I have that I'm working off of is dying, and it cannot handle it. It literally bloats the RAWs so much that the hard drive fails. So until I can get better equipment, we'll deal with how we can. We'll just do what we can. But I think the main crucial thing is about making them separate videos is I want to give time to them. And I really do feel like, at least based on how I'm feeling right now, which is extremely excited, they possibly will be some very juicy videos. And at the same time, I'm going to be very terrified to watch the chat on the premieres because I don't want people to confirm anything. Because I'm going to be getting into some stuff that I really am loving speculating on. Damn, anyways, let's move on to volume 6, chapter 7 of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, the novel series. As usual, definitely appreciate you guys' support, checking out the premieres whenever they air every Monday. Like I said, Mushoku Monday. And yes, I appreciate all the comments, likes, shares, all that kind of stuff. You guys are fantastic. Let's get into it. Opening up chapter 7, Rudeus and team find themselves in a small town within the Ch8 Kingdom. This is at a point where they have a fork in the road that heads towards country of Milis and the Astra Kingdom. So this is the point in which he's going to depart from Lilia, Aisha, Ginger, and all the soldiers. We find Lilia and Rudeus sitting at a table across from each other. At the same time, nearby, Eris is screaming about, yeah, that's right, Killmaster, he is so amazing. If he gets serious, he can make rain flood a forest and then freeze the entire thing solid. Aisha at the same time is like, you're talking about magic, right? That's amazing. And Eris is like, of course it is. I have even more astonishing stories that I could tell you. You want to hear them? Aisha's like, yes, please tell me. Reese is watching this through a window and he's smiling to himself before he turns his attention to Lilia. He really wasn't sure how to talk to Lilia after so long of being apart. I mean, yes, back a long time ago when they were living back at the village, you know, they got along with each other, especially after the whole situation where Lilia was going to have to leave the house and he stuck up for her and provided a way for her to stay there. They kind of talked a little bit then, but again, it's been a long time since they've talked to each other. He really isn't sure what to talk about. And yes, Lilia expressed a deep amount of gratitude to him. This is the second time that he's technically saved her life. But Rudeus is like, no, I didn't do anything. Like, he's literally saying, if you want to thank somebody, thank Eris, thank Rijerd. They're the one that should take your gratitude. But she's like, I heard from them that this was all part of your plan. Lilia got word that he had heard of their situation in Ch8, and that's why he came to the kingdom. But again, Rudeus doesn't want to take credit. In his own mind, he's like, the only reason I did that was because the man god gave me the directions to go there. And all I did, personally, was just get stuck. Again, that's sort of the feeling that we got reading it, honestly. It's just, Rudeus did nothing. The soldiers did stuff. Zanoba did stuff. Ginger did stuff. Rijerd, Eris, they all did the stuff. Rudeus just sat there. Now, granted, again, you could technically say because of his crafting of a figure, that technically is what resolved the situation. Let's be honest. The figure, him crafting it, that was what made it. His admiration for Roxy saved them in an indirect way. But yeah, Lilia's like, but Rijerd and Eris said that was your strategy. And he's like, no, that was not my strategy. She's like, okay, if that's how you feel. She looked kind of displeased. So following this, they kind of fell silent. A little awkwardness here. Then Lilia spoke up. Does Aisha, she kind of glanced outside, sometimes say things that are offensive? And he's like, of course not. She's an exceptional kid. No normal child could put that much forethought into their actions at 6. Lilia says, but she's not as great as you. I tried teaching her as much as I could in the last few years, but even now, my daughter's too stupid to understand how amazing you are, Lord Rudeus. Rudeus is like, calling her stupid's a bit overboard. In his mind, Rudeus once again hits on the fact that, yes, The reason why I have an advantage is because I had my past life. Now, he had considered that Aisha was the same as him, a reincarnate. Even so far that at some point, he actually asked her, casually if she knew of things like televisions and cell phones, but she just stared at him blankly. I kind of wish we had this actually in the novels at some point, this conversation with her where he's like, hey, do you know what a cell phone is? Because again, I thought that. I had a thought in the back of my head that there was a possibility that Aisha, being as smart as she is, she could have been a reincarnate. Now, I couldn't believe that she would have been an adult reincarnated into the child and then raised up just like Rudeus, just because of the fact that, again, she's still very childish. But again, that could all just be a ruse. That could just be her acting like, a ditz little girl. I mean, Rudeus every now and then sneaks out his maturity, and guess what it does? It blows up in his face most of the time. Like the first fight that he had with Paul. That turned out terrible. Like, that screwed with Paul's head. And yes, even how he talked to Sylphie's father. The dude was like, this kid's an alien. So in the end, Rudeus just believes that Aisha's just plain an ordinary genius. Paul's genes, as it turned out, were actually pretty incredible. Lilia says, what do you think of Aisha? He's like, huh? I told you, she's exceptional. I don't mean that. I mean her appearance. I think she's cute. She's my daughter. Do you think her bosom will develop as she grows? Rudeus is like, what? I have no interest in my little sister's chest. Besides, what are we talking about here? Lilia says, Lord Rudeus, if you intend to travel to Ashra, please take Aisha with you. I have to return to my master's side, but Aisha can go along with you, can't she? Rudeus says, can you tell me why you're asking this? I told her every single day that she would one day serve you. I've taught her every single thing I know. She's still young, but give her a few years and she'll have the body that all the boys will love. Remember that line. Remember that line. Where he says, wait, she's my sister, you realize? Lilia says, I know you're a womanizer. Rudeus realized that this is sort of true. But unlike his former self, he had no desire for those related by blood, which is why it made him feel uncomfortable when she presented Aisha to him like she was some sort of gourmet meal for consumption. He's like, she's only 6, right? She's at the age where she needs to be with her parent. She's like, well, if that's how you truly feel. Lilia looked disappointed despite the fact that he didn't really say anything wrong. Aisha was still young. She needed to be with her parents, right? I mean, yes, this is coming from somebody who is from Japan. He felt it was best that a child be with one, if not both parents. Which, yes, you can sort of argue that, yeah, in this world, things are quite different than our modern times world. Children are going to be having to be a more adult, quicker, all that kind of stuff. Yes, even more terrible things are technically involved with a lot of these older style worlds. Before governments and stuff established that stuff is kind of bad. Lilia finally followed up. I understand. It's true Aisha is still immature. I can't send her to you when she's still inexperienced. She's like, please don't teach her anything too weird, okay? Like about me being a pervert. I've only ever told her how wonderful you are. And because of that, she seems to be rebelling. Indeed, though only for the moment, she began to laugh quietly. Her expression turned bright and sunny. While Rudeus could not take Aisha with him, Lilia still did give Rudeus 2 things. A pendant and a pair of pantsu. Yes, the box that Zenoba had, again, was technically what Lilia was supposed to give to Rudeus. These were the 2 gifts for him for his birthday. At this point, Rudeus thanks her for the pendant and the pantsu. She says, it's no problem. I know how precious those things are to you. Yes, she's talking about the pantsu. Rudeus says, so, I guess carrying these things around does make people think I'm a pervert? Lydia's like, pervert? Is that something Aisha said to you? She leapt out of her chair. Rudeus had to sit her back down, calm her down. She was free to move around the castle, so someone must have put some strange things in her head. Strange. Lilia says, if underwear is enough to call someone a pervert, then what would happen if she went to work at the Asura Royal Palace? Rudeus confirms, yeah, technically, Lilia at some point was working for the Asura Royal Palace. For people that don't remember, way back in Volume 1, we got a little bit of a history of Lilia, that she used to work for the royal family. At some point, she stopped an assassin, but it left her with this poison. It messed up her legs. That's why she's not very physically fit anymore. She could do normal stuff, but things like running and sprinting is difficult for her. That was also confirmed when he was thinking about each individual family member during the whole displacement incident. He was a little worried around Lilia, and especially Aisha, and the idea that Lilia might not be able to protect herself because she's not as physically capable as she used to be. Yes, Lilia kind of confirms, compared to what she's seen there, Rudeus and Paul couldn't even be seen or even possibly described as perverts. Which, yeah, Rudeus to himself realizes, yeah, I guess, yeah, Asura Royal Palace have some real gentlemen there. I mean, he technically knows one particular noble family that really loved beast folk. Poor Saros. Lilia goes on, yeah, one of them loved women's, and then Rudeus cut her off. Nope, I don't need a detailed picture, thanks. Lilia says, anyhow, there are many amongst the royal noble families whose preferences run towards the perverse. Compared to that, having an interest in underwear of someone you look up to is rather normal. This is where they kind of wrap up their conversation. Rudeus says, please give my regards to my father. She says, understood. I'll give you money to cover the trip, but if it seems like it's not enough, just seek out the Adventure Guild, look for somebody that one of my father's subordinates, and they'll help you out. I'm sure that these soldiers that are escorting you can be trusted, but exercise extreme caution. They are still strangers. Lilia says, that's no problem. I'm acquainted with all of them. At this point, she comes across and hugged him to her chest. His face smothered in them. His breathing went erratic. Miss Lilia, they're in my face. She's like, you still haven't changed since you were little, and she gave off a small laugh. I really did think that they just absolutely nailed that scene in the anime, just having her just sneak in that hug behind him. It really hit. It was so heartwarming, such a cute little scene. You kind of seen that honesty in her face, that desire to just embrace him, and him kind of giving off that little comment. It was super cute. But yes, also Aisha coming up and her hiding away in the carriage. The next day, before they took off, Eris, Rizard, and Rudeus did some final checks on the carriage. Lilia and the others were already ready to leave in their own carriage. Aisha yells, Mr. Kittlemeister! Mr. Kittlemeister! Aisha flew out of the carriage and scrambled towards Rudeus. What is it? Aisha grabbed the hem of his shirt and dragged him along. She brought him all the way around to a small thicket by the roadside. It's there that she crouched down and she gestured to him. Mr. Kittlemeister, I actually have a favor to ask you privately. Favor? If it's something I can do, sure. He's thinking to himself, if my cute sister has a task for me, I will do my best to fulfill it. Norn already technically hated him. And he didn't want Aisha to hate him too. Though he did realize that it's probably because she thinks that he's Kittlemeister, not her actual brother. Please take me along with you. Did your mom tell you to say that? Rudeus thought that since he turned down Lilia, she'd probably have Aisha come and ask in tears instead. No, there's no way that mother would be okay with that. Every single day, my mother tells me I'm gonna serve my half-brother in the future. But, she slammed her fist onto the ground. I don't want a part of that. Rudeus obviously figured that this probably had something to do with his arousal of the underwear. He apologized in his own head. We talked about the other day, right? My brother is a pervert. I understand what you were saying, Kittlemeister, but I just can't bear with the thought of serving somebody like that. Is that right? So please, I beg of you, save me. Just gallantly as you did the other day. From that evil pervert's hands. She's really laying it on thick. But yeah, Rudeus knew this couldn't happen. One day, traveling together, she'd end up hearing his real name, and if she did find out that he had lied to her, wait, they're actually family. She was gonna figure it out eventually, right? He's like, I'm gonna have to pass on that. Why not? He's a pervert. That's just your imagination, not the facts. Rudeus figured at this point that he really just needed to set the facts straight. Trusting Lilia, who would probably lead to him being a pervert forever. It doesn't matter how perverted the folks in the palace were in her eyes. It's not going to change anything. Rudeus says, you've never really met him, have you? But there's no mistake in those pantsu. What other reason would he have to treasure those? Rudeus didn't really have an answer, but he sort of equated to people of certain religious faiths, worshipping the clothing worn by holy people. He felt it especially true for pantsu. Yeah. Hello? Hey, Rudy, my man, what's going on, man? Hey, can I ask you a favor, man? Can you... First the extra olive oil thing, and now this. I mean, you're gonna get me demonetized, man. I mean, because it's in there, I have to read it on the YouTube video. You're gonna get me demonetized, man. Just try. Just try. All right, man? All right? Yeah, it's cool, man. All right, I'll talk to you later, man. Yeah, Roxy forever. Roxy forever, man. I feel you. This novel's gonna make me say something inappropriate again. Last video was the olive oil thing. He felt it especially true for pantsu when it was worn by Roxy while she was rocking her one-handed lady band. It was a rare item of the highest level player. If a player cared about that kind of stuff, they'd treasure it for the rest of their lives. The motto of Rudeus's personal faith was lust and studies are both important. Combine them together to get sexual studies, the golden standard. That aside, Rudeus says, Roxy was your brother's former tutor, right? Aisha says, yes. So she had a great impact on your brother, right? I suppose so. In his mind, Rudeus corrected her downplay. Roxy was the person that helped Rudeus do something that he hadn't been able to do for 20 years. Again, 20 years of locking himself up. The reason he was living his life the way he was because of Roxy. The reason why he's been able to do anything in this world was of Roxy. She, again, like I said in, 2 videos ago, she was the one that pushed him across the starting line. Otherwise, he would still be sitting there at the starting line. Probably even till now. That's how much impact she had. Rudeus goes on, then perhaps he wanted to treasure it as an item that somebody incredibly important to him wore. Seeing that she wasn't satisfied by this answer, he decided to give her an item that her idol, the Kennel Master, had been wearing. He took out the forehead protector from his pocket and handed it to her. I've used this forehead protector for a long time. Why are you bringing this up all of a sudden? Because I'm going to give it to you. Now, he does note that despite him washing at some point during his travels from Rikarisu, where he ended up purchasing it from, it still has some traces of sweat in it. Again, going with the same concept here. Even as disgusting as this is, it's going for the same concept here. Despite the fact that, again, olive oil was washed. Now, this is when it clicked. Aisha looked a little shocked. But as she cradled it in her hand, she said, now I kind of understand. Does it make more sense emotionally now than it did when I explained it by words? Yeah, I get it now. So my brother wasn't a pervert. Mr. Kennel Master, you really are a good person. I'm not that great. He gave her his Rudeus smile. Aisha looked at him with stars in her eyes. Oh, right. My brother's still missing. If he's dead, will you allow me to serve you instead? No, I'm not sure about that. I'm sure you'll understand when you see my mom, but I think I'm going to grow up to be a pretty amazing. My body... Again, here it is. With a body all the boys will adore. He's like, a body of boys will adore? Do you even know what that means? It means a body that will make you want to start making babies when you see it, right? A child shouldn't be talking about making babies. He's like, who the heck is teaching you this stuff? It's Lilia, dude. It's Lilia. Why doesn't Rudeus get it? Why doesn't he get it? At this rate, she's going to be swept off by a pervert. Is there anything I could say to change your mind? Do you hate me that much? Suddenly her eyes glistened tearfully. All right, fine. If your brother's never found, sure. Then you're not mad at me for calling you a pervert? No, of course not. Huh? There's the realization point. I love it. It was like in the carriage when she was going off in the anime, and here it's like literally right in front of him. So you're okay with me you're mad at me for calling you a pervert? She yells, thanks, big brother, and runs off and goes the carriage. Rudeus is just sitting there dumbfounded. When the carriage rolled in motion, Aisha turned and waved at him. Lilia at the same time bowing. See you, big brother. Let's meet again. It's a promise. And off they went. Very, like, cut off, like, it's done. Like, bam, they're done. They're gone. Like, don't chase them down and go, wait, let's talk. At this point, Rudeus is trying to figure out, when did she figure it out? Maybe because he called her Aisha when they first met? Maybe Eris and Rajerd slipped it out at some point? But why did she pretend not to know? That's what he couldn't figure out. The only thing he didn't really figure is maybe she did it to determine if her brother was somebody that she could trust. If he kept on the charade and took her with him, she no doubt would have turned her back on him. She was truly brilliant. Clever little girl. He looked forward to seeing her once she got older. And that's chapter 7. That's chapter 7. Pretty on point with the anime was pretty on point with this. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I think the main key thing here, I want to be perfectly clear. I do really appreciate the fact that Rudeus really downplayed himself. Again, acknowledging he really had nothing to do with what happened in Tirani. Yes, it was him that got them there. But as we already know, based on how things kind of resolved, it was going to get resolved anyways. There was a good chance that it would have resolved even without him there. The key point to why I'm suspecting that he even went there was because, again, the man god told him, but it wasn't to save Aisha and Lilia. It was to meet Zenoba. I believe so. Or to dethrone Pax. One of the two of those man god, I think, wanted. Now, the nugget that was in this part, and it didn't dawn on me when I watched the anime. So you can call me an idiot. I'm fine. I'm used to being called an idiot because I miss something. I cover a lot of stuff, and so every now and then there's something I don't catch because I'm too busy covering everything else. So I often miss things that other people find, and that's perfectly fine. In the anime, I did not get the forehead protector concept. It didn't really dawn on me what the trigger was there. Yes, I understand the idea that he was giving her something that from somebody that she admired, but it never really clicked on in my head that that was resolving the issue with the Pantsu. And maybe that's because I didn't go check it again. I think I did watch it, but I don't remember really honing in on this. So somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think the anime was emphasizing once again in that scene that she was upset about her big brother because the Pantsu. And I think in this scene, she's stuck on it. Like every scene that they're talking about her big brother, she's talking about the Pantsu. She can't get over it. That's the thing that she keeps sticking on, and she won't let it go. So every time she talks about her big brother, it's about the Pantsu. He carried Pantsu. He's a pervert. That's all she really had. Yeah, other than the fact that she did mention the idea that, you know, she heard that he peeked in on Roxy and all that kind of stuff. Pantsu is the key thing. And so what the light novel did that I don't think the anime did for me was emphasize how much she was stuck on that, and that he was trying to figure out a way to make her understand his admiration. Yes, if you distill the whole situation with Rudeus and the Pantsu, he's a pervert. That's just, like, he's keeping this girl's Pantsu. But when you try to think of it in terms of somebody who is broken like Rudeus was, again, a shut-in, transported in this world, he's still shut in at this point in this new world. He's an idiot pervert, but still, and he stole her Pantsu in a feat of pervertness. But after Roxy did those things for him, it suddenly became a treasure. So it went from him stealing it for perverted reason to it being this treasure. He admired and worshipped her. So it became this item of somebody that he cherished so much. And so in this conversation with Aisha, he's trying to figure out, how does he explain why this is so important? Oh, Aisha adores and, in a sense, worships the Kennel Master. Give this over to her. Or actually out of his pocket in the night novel. Let me give this to her. And that's why he points out the fact that it's still got some sweat in it. It's similar to the fact that he had that cloth that had the extra virgin olive oil. So giving this headband to her, he's like, now you understand. Now I'm showing you physically, rather than telling you, I'm going to show you and give you an example of this important thing. How do you feel now? I gave this to you. How do you feel now? Now, it's an assumption that she would cherish him as much as he cherishes Roxy and thus understand it, but then it clicks for her. Oh, now I understand. And I think that's the point in which, in her mind, she's testing him or whatever. I think that's the point in which it clicks for her. Oh, okay, maybe my brother's not so bad. Like, I'm standing here in front of my brother, and I'm testing him, and he's finally, this one thing that sort of creeps me out about my big brother that's sitting in front of me, he's finally described why he does that. And now that one stain on my vision of my brother is finally fixed. And now I'm okay with him knowing that I know who he is. I kind of wish that there was a little more clear about when exactly she figured it out, and maybe that might be, I know that there's a chapter in this novel where it's Aisha and Lilia, I think. So maybe in that chapter with Aisha and Lilia, it will explain the change point. I do know that I kind of briefly browsed it, and I know that it's more about Aisha teasing Lilia about her not knowing that it's actually her brother, but I'll be interested to see if it actually explains it then, or maybe it's way later. She'll explain when she figured it out, but my prediction would be that it was a point in which Rudeus explained to Aisha that he was involved in the displacement as well, and that he was training somebody in Ashra. Seems like that's a little bit too much of a convenience that he is the same age as her older brother, and he's training somebody in Ashra just like he was. I think she pieced it all together during that conversation. But easily, without a doubt, it would have to happen by the point that he essentially explained the Pantsu thing to her. Denying her so much and then finally going out of his way to explain to her why him having the Pantsu is okay. But no, it was great. Super great. I love the scene with Lilia and Rudeus. I think, again, the anime really nailed that one. I love the hug and all that kind of stuff, but let's get into Chapter 8. To be honest, Chapter 8 is a lot of information dump, and it's world-building stuff that I love, so I'm all over it. So, leaving the Surrounding Kingdom, they went westward. Their destination, obviously, is Austria Kingdom. The road was flat, the weather was warm, the grass was far as eyes can see. In a distance ahead of them was the outline of the Red Wyrm Mountains. They could see above them circling shadows. Obviously, the worms. He knew that bandits would occasionally attack them when they were on their journey. Obviously, these guys want to steal their stuff. Eris was kind enough to give them some iron fists. She's so kind. And they let them get away. Reserve was actually tempted to just kill them, but after they sort of found out that these bandits were just looking for food, like they were hurting for food, they decided to kind of let them go. He kind of figures that a lot of the bandits are increasing because of the whole conflict zone being right nearby, so all the conflicts that's happening there is probably causing people to have to resort to being bandits. But even still, he kind of notes that this place is super peaceful. You know, these people have it really good. Again, once again, comparing the Central Continent to the Demon Continent, like everything, he was such a bad place with the Demon Continent that it seems like every time he notes how great things are happening over here, it's kind of like that whole thing of, you guys don't know what you got. Yes, he knows that in the Demon Continent, you rarely seen bandits on the streets because there was monsters everywhere. If you're on the road, you're more likely to run into monsters. So bandits would never be out there. But here, because it's so peaceful and there's not a lot of monsters around, bandits can survive running around and, you know, attacking carriages. This is where he goes into explaining the Red Wyrm Mountains. They were these huge mountain ranges that stretched across the Central Continent. And it split it into 3 parts. And of course, the name of Red Wyrm Mountains comes from the fact that red worms reside in them. Red worms were said to be the strongest monsters on the Central Continent. While fearsome alone, they often gathered in hordes of 100. They had a special ability of detection, allowing them to never miss anything that came into their territory. And no matter how fierce their opponent was, they would swarm together and devour everything, bones and all. Of course, there's many different species of dragons in this world, all of them being A rank or higher. Red worms were the most ferocious and dangerous of them. Alone, a red worm is a low S rank, but again, they always came in groups. This meant that the mountain itself is just kind of an impassable mountain range, a symbol of death. Though he does note that red worms do have one weakness though. They're terrible flyers. They're terrible flyers. They couldn't take flight from flat terrain. Instead, they always had to kind of leap off tall cliffs or run down a long slope just to take flight. For this reason, it was very rare for them to go down and attack anything living in the plains. It was like my immediate question was that, like, how often do people around this mountain get attacked? Well, there's your answer. Though on occasion, every now and then, one of the idiots amongst the horde would get caught in turbulent wind or something else and fall down to the plains. When this happened, especially near human villages, this would be devastation for the area. Villagers would call upon adventurers or soldiers. Requests for dealing with these red worms was an S rank request. But even still, a lot of adventurers would go and hunt them down rather than take the request if they couldn't take the request. A good party could form, trap it, and kill it, and sell all the parts for high value. Dragon meat and bones were good for armor. This skin was a highly valued work of art. Everything could be utilized. While the money would have to be divvied out to a lot of people if this was a big party, it would still allow them to live lavishly for an entire year. One dragon was worth 100 gold coins. And yes, like I mentioned before, while a lot of newbies couldn't take an S rank request, they would still take on the challenge just to get those materials. But typically, most people would end up burned alive and devoured. Now, back to the subject about the Red Wyrm Mountains. There was 2 points of passage through these mountains. These were 2 gorges sandwiched between steep rock faces known as the lower and upper jaw. These ravines existed back as far as the Second Human-Demon War. Apparently, during that time, Laplace unleashed red worms upon armies passing through it, which, yes, Reserve was able to confirm because, again, he was technically there. At this point, Rudeus and his team was heading towards the lower jaw. This connected the southern and western regions of the Central Continent. Once through, they would arrive at Austria Kingdom. However, they were taking a detour around. Despite Eris believing that they would be just fine, Reserve protested. She even suggested that Rudeus would be just fine handling them. And the reason that she had this in her head is apparently Ghislaine once said that she slew one of these stragglers before. But Rudeus didn't remember this conversation. If Paul was there with her, he would definitely boast about it. According to Eris, this has apparently happened before she became Sword Saint. She fought it with 5 other advanced tier sword fighters. He's like, well, how many died? Only 2 of them died. He's like, you idiot. That's not good numbers. That aside, The problem was that it was a straggler. Rudeus pointed out the errors were full of these red worms. It was one to face off against the king dragons. Those group consisted of a few worms, or black worms who didn't form flocks. But again, red worms swarmed in hundreds. At this point, Reserve confirms you have no hope against a worm horde. If there was anyone that could, they would be the mightiest champion amongst the 7 great powers. Even the North God and Sword God would likely turn away halfway through. At this, Rudeus was a little bit shocked. He assumed that the 7 great powers would easily dispatch these dragons. But now he questioned that mindset. Reserve then clarified that they would likely be drained halfway through, being unlikely able to sleep with the dragons around. Reserve goes on, that said, Laplace subjugated the king of the red worms, so those ranked at the top of the 7 great powers could probably pass through without issue. Though, if we're speaking of the 7 great powers of old, even the god in last place could pass through the red worm's territory undisturbed, I'm sure. Eris says, well, still, I'd like to hunt one of them one day. Rudeus is thinking, man, they're dangerous thinking. I guess if he ever had to actually fight one, he would make sure to enlist her help. Are we flagging a red worm fight? Are we flagging one? Again, this is a lot of stuff that I really eat up. It really makes this entire area just feel like a living, breathing area. And just the absolute crazy dangerousness of these mountains is pretty crazy. Even considering the fact that I think we've seen Orsted at some point walking around there and just blasted one of them. Again, one idiot red worm that decided to veer off the course and leave the group, leave the pack, and get killed. Just a few days after their arrival at the red worm's lower jaw, Rudeus was preparing a meal. At this point, he's thinking about the man god, especially about what happened in Sharoni a few days ago. It went a little bit too well for him. He felt the man god may have the power to possibly change the future. No, he figured Ginger would probably still have lured Zenoba to meet him, even if he didn't have the figurine. Zenoba would probably still have done the same thing, Regierd probably the same thing as well. Even if he told Aisha his real name, she may have feared her chastity, but I don't know why he thinks that. He may have, she might just kind of steal his money and flee anyways, but still, he'd be able to get with Regierd and tell him, hey, help me find my sister, and he would totally have done it. The more he thought about it, he started to think that the man's god advice was meant to ensure things turned out more or less the same no matter what he did. And this sort of makes me think, that's technically true. In a lot of cases, the man god typically tells him, hey, go here. Or, hey, notice this thing. Or, hey, ask this guy for help. He never gets into details. It was only this time that he technically gave him a bunch of details because he asked for it. In most cases, it's really just putting Rudeus in some area and it happens. So, it's not that far of a stretch to think that no matter what, it's still going to turn out that way. Again, as long as he pushes him that direction. Again, if you think about it, if he didn't press him for more details, what would the man god have said? Hey, you need to go to Sharoni. That would probably be all he would say. And this is all turn out that way. But no, he goes on, like with Regierd. Even if he didn't ask him for help, he still would end up traveling with them. He honestly felt like the man god was taking a lot into consideration when he gave advice. Perhaps Rudeus could trust him. However, Rudeus couldn't fathom the man god's motives. Honestly, he felt like if he could figure out what the man god really wanted, then Rudeus could be more honest with him. While he's thinking about the man god, he eventually notices Eris and Regierd are training nearby. Rudeus notes that Eris's growth is a real eye-opener. A year ago, he could use his demon eyes and defeat her easily, even getting the opportunity in the middle of the fight to be able to pull down her panties. But now, he could probably barely beat her using his demon eye and using all of his mana. Yes, he technically could really easily defeat her if he had some distance, but he says then there would be no physical contact and then it wouldn't be a real victory for him. Rudeus believes it's really about his body. Like, his body can't keep up compared to her. His stamina technically is like on average for a Japanese person, but in this world, it's very mediocre. At this point, Regierd calls for the training to be done. He knows that Regierd lately stopped asking Eris if she understood the training. Like we noticed way before, whenever they would spar or whatever, he would always end the fight with, do you understand? He's just basically asking, do you understand why you lost? But it seemed like that wasn't need to be said anymore. She was naturally soaking up everything. At this point, Eris comes to Rudeus' side. He kind of wrings out this rag and gives it to her. She starts to tuck it down inside her shirt and dry herself off. He notes that she used to just immediately just take off all of her clothes down to her bra and just pat herself down, but unfortunately he kept giving her the pervy face, so she decided to start doing this. And so he knows that she's probably like super sticky and icky after every match because she can't dry herself completely off, so he apologizes in his own mind. Regierd says, Eris, from today on, you can call yourself a warrior. Rudeus thinks, a warrior, huh? Not a sword fighter. Rudeus thought, but then he realized what he meant. Does that mean you're an adult now? Eris sat next to Rudeus. He's seen the look on her face before. It was the kind where she was so happy that a big grin threatened to spread across her face. But she was trying to hold it back, thinking she needed to be more reserved. Eris says, "But Reserved, I still haven't defeated you at all." "That's not a problem. You already have a sufficient amount of strength as a warrior." Rudeus thinks that it's Reserved's way of giving his approval to Eris, just as Ghislaine had when she first permitted Eris to use the title of Advanced Swordsman. He thinks that Reserved was now trying to do the same thing by saying that Eris can call herself a warrior. Rudeus says, "Congratulations, Eris." Her eyes darted to him. "Rudeus, this isn't a dream, is it? Could you pinch me?" "You won't punch me if I do, right?" "I won't punch you." At that point, she gave her word. He reached out and pinched her nipple with his fingers. Gently, of course, or sexually would be the better word. Eris' fist wasn't as gentle. "Where the hell are you pinching?" "Sorry, but it's not a dream. Otherwise, it wouldn't hurt so bad." Eris' face was bright red. She covered her chest with her arms. Reserved says, "But don't get a big head. That means I'm not going to treat you like a child anymore. Got it?" That night, something was bothering Rudeus. He called out to Reserved, who was on watch with his eyes closed, obviously using his third eye. "Reserved, why did you say that to Eris?" "Because no matter how much time passes, you will keep treating her like a child." Rudeus thought to himself, was Eris a child or not? She was 20 years younger than he was in his previous life, and he felt like he was incredibly patient with her when she was little. This is a girl who used him as a personal punching bag for the longest time. What was wrong with seeing her as a child? Sure, Eris has grown much more mature as of late. Not just counting physically. Slowly but surely, she learned right from wrong. She rarely went on rampages without the thought of consequences. Her wild instincts weren't completely gone, but the frequency of her outbursts had decreased. You could say that she was in the process of going from a child to an adult. Or so he'd like to think. But yes, Rudeus realizes that he's not the most shining example of an adult. Reserved follows up, "Ah well, it's alright if you don't understand." Rudeus had a really bad feeling about this last conversation. This is some awful final conversation from some TV series before somebody's killed off. Rudeus tossed him a gold coin and asked him to put it into his breast pocket. Reserved's like, alright, what is this for? Rudeus says, "It's a good luck charm." It's like flag, 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 flag. We all know what's coming up next, but the end of this chapter is flag, 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 flag. A few days later, they arrive at the entrance of the Astra Kingdom. Yes, the Red Wyrm's lower jaw. 4 months have passed since they set out from Ch7 Kingdom. Rudeus really felt like when things happened, they happened quickly. Like parents dying suddenly, siblings coming at him suddenly, Paul shipping him off, transporting to a demon continent. But there was something else that Rudeus hadn't realized yet. How harsh the world really was. How easily people die. No matter the person. Death could come at an instant. It would take Rudeus a long time, but eventually he would come to understand that death is a phenomenon that abruptly robbed him of those closest to him. If he had known this back then, he wouldn't have needed to lament so deeply now. Quote, "If only I had been more serious about getting stronger. Strong enough that I wouldn't be defeated by anyone." After what had happened, he couldn't help but be consumed by regrets, wishing he'd walked a slightly different path. There was one thing he could say though, Eris never failed to impress him. That's it. That's chapter 8. What an ominous final paragraphs of this chapter. Now, the one thing I do want to note, I don't think they're talking about Turning Point 2. Obviously, they're not talking about Turning Point 2. That's the weird thing. Now, let me be perfectly honest. This last segment of chapter 8, I think when this chapter was released, it was meant to be a fake out for Turning Point 2. I believe he wrote this segment to make you think that when crap goes down with Orsted in Turning Point 2, you think he's talking about that. But the crazy thing, and I don't want any comments, I don't want anybody in the chat right now with the premiere, I think this is for later. Because he says he's talking about death, people dying, and that he has this regret. And we know, again, spoilers for those that have not watched season 1 of the anime adaptation. And yes, technically for those that have read on, I've already read past to chapter 10. Nobody dies. So he's not talking about Turning Point 2. He's talking about something else, but I think he put this here to make you think he's talking about Turning Point 2. Which makes me wonder, and again, spoilers for Season 1 of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, we know that Eris departs from Rudeus. So it makes me think that this is talking about something that happens way later when he re-meets up with Eris, and Eris is going to be kicking some major butt, and he's going to be losing people. Eris never failed to impress him. It's so good. I don't know what he's talking about, and it scares me. He scares me. He scares me. But no, this segment, this chapter was, I think of these two chapters, is a nugget. And again, I already said that I'm not going to get into chapter 9. It's going to take way too long. But this is another point where it's obviously trying to show that growth of Eris in Rudeus' mind. And I think this is a great segment to happen just before Turning Point 2. And I think this is something that I think was completely lost in the anime. I don't even think I know they had the scene where Rudeus and Eris were fighting. And eventually they stop their match. And then eventually Rudeus tells her that she can call herself a warrior. That was all adapted. But I don't remember this segment afterward where he's really questioning why Rudeus said that. Now, I will be honest. I don't understand what Rudeus is talking about. What did Rudeus say that he's questioning her? Now, the last thing that Rudeus said to Eris in that conversation was, don't get a big head. That means I'm not going to treat you like a child anymore. Got it? In terms of what we've known from Rudeus is that he protects children. And he does everything possible to protect children. That just means that he's no longer going to be going out of his way to protect her as a child. What is Rudeus not getting from that statement? But yes, technically when he presses Rudeus really throws it back in his face to say, you're always going to treat her like a child. I might as well stop treating her like a child. He's finally acknowledging her as a warrior. He's finally saying that she's learned enough, that she's strong enough, that she no longer has to see herself as inadequate in his eyes. He acknowledges her, which is very important for her to see. And honestly, I think that's a crucial thing to his final statement to Eris as they're about to depart each other later on. And I cannot wait to read that part. I can't wait to read that part. Oh, it's going to hurt. It killed me in the anime. It's probably going to kill me in the novels. But it's still a good point, despite the fact that I don't understand how it goes from don't get a big head, I'm no longer treat like a child anymore, to why'd you say that? And, well, because you're going to continue to treat her like a child. Because it starts to make Rudeus really understand, oh, should I still see her as a child? Is she grown up enough? We've obviously seen a massive growth in Eris, and I think this furthers that. I honestly think the culmination of this scene and Rudeus' inner thoughts of what he thinks of Eris over this entire span of time, plus everything they go through with Turning Point 2, how can he not see her as an adult? How can he not see her as more than just a bratty child? She is strong. She is determined. She fights fear that nobody else would probably be able to stand up against. Just the sheer nature of the fear that Orsted's curse causes a person, breaking past that, fighting something that seems to be impossible, fighting something that literally wipes the floor with Rudeus, somebody you could never dream of defeating, but still jumping ahead. Everything from the journey from Demon Continent to this point, to that growth, to her becoming a true adventurer, to her becoming so dang strong, to the point of fighting tooth and nail against the impossible for the one you love, for the one you admire, says something. Now, yes, Rudeus is saying this without the context of the Turning Point 2, but he's saying exactly what he's seen this entire time that Rudeus doesn't seem to acknowledge at this point. That she is no longer a child. She's traveled across the entire world and faced difficulties that no other person has ever faced in their life. She has had to take lives, save lives, and face atrocities that nobody else has. That is a fast-track blitz to maturity if I've ever seen one. Moving on to Chapter 9, the second turning point. I'm joking. I actually was planning on doing that as a joke just to actually do it. But again, like I said, I can't do it. That's it. That is, don't hit the down vote. But yes, that's Volume 6, Chapter 7 and 8. Again, I deeply apologize that I am not jumping straight into Chapter 9. Again, I really do feel like Chapter 9 and 10 are going to be insanely long because I have way too much to talk about. So I hope that you all will just be, instead of angry, be excited for next week. Get your calendar set, all that kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope that you guys will be excited for it. But as per usual, I greatly appreciate everybody's support for checking out the videos, sharing them out, hitting the like button, commenting, being in the premieres and chatting with me. It's a lot of fun with you guys in there. If you are new to this whole thing, I would appreciate if you hit that subscription button there so you can get all my videos. I do other content as well, news, reviews, first impressions, top list. It's anime, it's pretty much here. And yes, I do a chapter-by-chapter coverage of the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series, and I'm looking forward to more. If you are able to, I greatly appreciate if you consider supporting us on Patreon or tips link or super thanks button down below. I greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel. And until the next Mushoku Mondays, y'all take care.